Hello there, you're watching BrassTacks on CNN News 18. I'm Maha Siddiqui. First of all, take a look at these two pictures that we'll just show to you with regards to the relationship that we are seeing panning out between India and Russia and India and the United States. A handshake between President Biden and President Putin and Prime Minister Modi that happened today. One happened in the month of September, the other one happening today, just a few hours ago. In the midst of the pandemic, two important summit-level meetings have happened. As I pointed out, for one, Prime Minister Modi traveled to America to meet President Biden, and for the other, President Putin has traveled to India for 6 hours to hold the 21st annual summit. Significantly, only the second visit abroad for President Putin in the last 1 year and a half. The only other time he left Russia since the pandemic was to meet President Biden in Geneva. The summit and the defense cooperation, as well as agreements with Russia at a time when US has been building pressure on India to look to it for defense procurements, and Russia has been expressing reservation about India's proximity to America. It's a time-tested ally Moscow versus strategic partner US for India, or can India embrace both at the same time in a highly polarized world? That's our debate this evening, and our panelists for the debate: Vivek Karju, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs; Dmitry Babich, political analyst with the Voice of Russia radio station; Praveen Swami, Group Consulting Editor for Network 18; and General VP Malik, former Army Chief, all with us here on the show. But before the deep dive into the debate, here's a look at the defense sector that both the US and the Russians are competing for in India. This is now a comparison of the defense deals or cooperation that India has had with America on the one hand, with Russia on the other side. This is the Predator drones with America. Cost is there for you to see, 22 crores there. A joint venture for AK-203 rifles that has been in fact signed today for 5,100 crores. This will be manufactured in India as well. One unit of Nasam's 11. This is a cost of over 7,000 crores with the Russian side. S-400s. This is a big missile defense system deal against which, of course, the Americans have expressed their unhappiness. Also, the threat of Kartsa looming large over India over that deal as well. But the first deliveries for S-400s has already started. Another deal over 7,000 crore rupees is the Instar aircraft. As far as Russia is concerned, air-to-air missiles, a deal of 1,500 crores, and 6 Poison 81 aircrafts. There a deal of 17,500 crore with the Americans, and a deal of over 2.8 billion with the Russian side on the other hand for another aircraft. Super Hercules, this is C-130J. This is with the Americans, over 7,000 crore rupee deal, and Ka-2260 military choppers deal with Russia at a cost of $1 billion. So clearly you can see these are the big deals, both sides clearly angling for it. Russia has been India's time-tested partner, has had great defense ties with India, but US of late has been stressing that India should look to the US for further defense procurements. And now another aspect of bilateral ties between any countries, but here of course we are looking at US and Russia. Trade and investment. The bilateral trade between US and India is in fact over $88 billion. That was in 2019-2020. The trade relations between India and US have been troubled over the last couple of years. This specifically because Donald Trump, the predecessor of Biden, had rather been making public statements about it. Trade between India and Russia, though, remains modest at $10 billion. But President Putin, interestingly, brought it up first in his opening remarks today, saying it has seen an upward trend both this year and last year. And finally, let's talk about the strategic ties with the threats surrounding India. Both US and Russia play a significant role.
Dear Prime Minister, dear friends, I'm so very happy to be able to travel here to visit the friendly country of India. We perceive India as a great power, a friendly nation, and a time-tested friend.
एक्सेलेंसी, वर्ष 2021 हमारे द्विपक्षीय संबंधों के लिए कई मायनों में महत्वपूर्ण है। आर्थिक क्षेत्र में भी अपने रिश्तों को और घनिष्ठ बनाने के लिए हम एक लॉन्ग टर्म विजन अपना रहे हैं। हमने 2025 तक $30 बिलियन के ट्रेड और $50 बिलियन के निवेश का लक्ष्य रखा है।
So how does India balance the relationship? Can India actually embrace both the US and Russia at the same time in a highly polarized world? Let me go across to General Malik for an overarching perspective, General Malik, because we are not just talking about the defense ties here. We are also talking about several other aspects that make for a bilateral relationship. And here one would also look at trade, investment, strategic partnership. Do you believe that only the defense partnership between India and Russia is overarching and makes them better friends of India than America?
Good evening, Maha, and good evening, everyone. Firstly, I must emphasize that a country of India's size and the kind of role that we envisage for ourselves, I think there is no alternative to Atmanirbharta or self-reliance. And I'm speaking from my experience, having seen what happened during 1965, 71, and 99. So first preference for me, as far as I'm concerned, is Atmanirbharta, self-reliance. Of course, self-reliance doesn't mean for every weapon or every equipment we should produce ourselves, but I would say critical equipment must be produced ourselves. Now, secondly, as far as Russian and India-Russian ties are concerned, defense ties are concerned, these are very old and they have remained very steady throughout. The other thing I must say is that particularly our Navy and Air Force has got a very large component of weapons and equipment purchased from Russia, and they will remain dependent on them for spare parts and for servicing, etc. That is very important. Earlier, we were only dependent on Russia. Now we are dependent on USA also, and in fact, quite a bit. And although there is a competition, obviously there is a geopolitical competition between Russia, two powers, USA and Russia. But I think as far as we are concerned, we have to have defense ties with both countries. And particularly with Russia, we'll have to continue having these. One more aspect that I want to mention, which I think the defense people do not wish to forget, is that the manner in which the USA conducted itself with us during our critical situation, our crisis situation in 1965, 71, and even in 99. The Russians came out to be better friends, and we could depend upon them much more than we were able to do as far as, so that that part cannot be forgotten by the armed forces in India.
So certainly, sir, you are pointing out defense ties have been very strong with the Russians, with the Americans. It's just coming up. But Ambassador Karju, we all know that Russians are not comfortable with India's proximity to the United States, and US wants India to rely more on it for defense deals, which would virtually mean severing important links with Russia. Today, India has not just signed a deal for AK-203 with Russia, but the first deliveries of S-400 have also started. Is India taking a risk here, sir, with the US, or simply exercising its sovereignty?
Look, this geopolitical situation of the world is evolving and evolving rapidly. New relationships are being forged, old ones are being diluted. And in this situation, each country is seeking to look after its interests as best as it can. In the defense sector, there has been a long history of India-Russia relationship going back to the Soviet times. But in the new situation, it is only natural that India would seek to diversify its sources of supplies, of imports, of defense equipment, in keeping with what is best for itself. And that is something all mature countries understand, and I'm sure the Russians understand this too. Now, as far as we are concerned, we are seeing that the Russia-China relationship is getting very cemented. At this time, the Russians are opening up in a big way with Pakistan. Yes. So, as a mature country, we also have to understand that the Russians have interests and we'll have to acknowledge those interests.
Okay.
In this situation, on an overall level, I think the leadership, both in India and Russia, are trying to expand of cooperation where both countries can proceed.
Okay.
Acknowledging at the same time that there are interests that are diverging.
All right. Okay. Let me go across to our guest from Russia then. Dmitry, does India's relationship with either Russia or the US have to be at the cost of the other? Why is Russia so uncomfortable with India's friendship with the United States? No country in the world has any sort of exclusive relationship. And as Ambassador Karju is mentioning, Russia also having close ties with Pakistan and China at this juncture is something that could make India uncomfortable.
I don't think that Russia made too much of a scandal about India's relations with the United States. If you look at the statements that followed today's visit of President Putin to India, there were no such statements that would express any kind of dissatisfaction. Let me remind you that India and Pakistan are both members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, to which Russia attributes huge importance. You know, this is considered to be one of the main successes of Russian diplomacy, the fact that this organization, which was founded by us together with China in the late 90s, managed to attract such different countries as India, Pakistan, or even Iran is now seeking membership. So basically, we're not against India having what the previous speaker called self-reliance. We're not against it having good relations with the United States and with the European Union. I think this is something that makes Russia and the Collective Security Treaty Organization that we are heading, it makes us different from NATO. We don't prohibit, for example, Kazakhstan wants to have good relations with the United States. We don't prohibit it to have good relations with the United States. We don't prohibit, say, Kyrgyzia from having good relations with the EU and with the United States. Both of these countries, Kyrgyzia and neighboring Uzbekistan, had American military bases on their territory in the early 2000s, and Russia was not against it because these were supposed to be bases against Taliban, against this terrorist organization, which we continue to consider a terrorist organization. If you say the word Taliban in Russia, you are obliged by the law to add that this is a terrorist organization prohibited in Russia.
Okay.
Of course, it doesn't mean that we're not having an embassy in Afghanistan, because Afghan people, it's not just Taliban, it's a lot of, these are basically 38 million of people, you know, very important nation. We are interested in having ties to them, but it doesn't mean we like the organization that rules the country.
But Dimitri, I'll just interrupt you there. Dimitri, I'll just interrupt you there because you have made 2 points. One about Russia not having made any statement which at the moment reflects that it's uncomfortable with India's relationship with the US, and you also spoke about Taliban. We'll take both of those separately. First, I want to go across to Praveen Swami on the aspect of India, US and Russia not having made any statement per to say. But Praveen, just look at the language that is sometimes used, and it reveals a lot about what the other country is feeling. While the Indo-Pacific is referred to as Indo-Pacific by India and the Quad nations and many other nations, in the press statement by the Russian side when this meeting and 2+2 was announced, they used the word Asia-Pacific, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of Indo-Pacific, attaching it to a construct by the Americans, isn't it, Praveen?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's any secret that Russia is uncomfortable with the American vision for Asia. Even today, we had Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov say something, and I paraphrase, but that there were ongoing attempts by the United States to undermine the India-Russia relationship and to make India follow the American vision for how the region should develop. And this is understandable. I mean, Russia is subject to an increasingly hostile relationship with the United States. And it's also a close partner with China. China has a far larger economic and strategic relationship with Russia today than the India-Soviet Union or the India-Russia relationship ever was. Now, is it true that Russia has not sought to tie India into some sort of unilateral relationship? Yes. Is it also true that Russia does not want India drifting into what it would see as the American orbit? That is also true. And for India, there is a very real problem here because India needs the United States to hedge against China. It's drawn ever closer to the United States towards that end. But there's obviously a bill to be paid for it. And it will be very interesting to see, I mean, all this talk of multipolarity notwithstanding, exactly what India is willing to concede to the United States for this alliance against China.
Okay. General Malik, so while Russia may be uncomfortable with the idea of India being close to the Americans and is probably accusing India of its proximity with the US, but look at the US as well. The threat of a sanction, CAATSA sanction, because of the purchase of S-400 still looms large over India. There has been no clarity from America, and it has slammed those sanctions against Turkey, which is its ally in NATO, for the same deal. So how does India go about then doing this balancing act between US and Russia?
I do believe that we will have to continue doing this balancing act. The other thing is that I don't think we should compare ourselves with Turkey today as far as our relations with US is concerned. US also is dependent on India for many things. And look at our trade. It's a huge trade with USA, unlike it is with Russia.
Yes.
And as far as the defense, as CAATSA that you have mentioned, I think we have taken the right step by importing S-400 air defense missiles. And we have, I think, we are going to buy about 5 squadrons of that, which is needed. And it is an important weapon system for us. So we will continue to do this tightrope walking. And I think we have to look after our national interest, particularly for the defense equipment and defense weapons. I think that's a very important issue, which both Russia as well as USA will have to realize that we cannot be dependent only on one and not the other in the kind of situation that we have today in our country.
Dimitri, I want to come back to you on the aspect of something that President Putin mentioned today in his opening statements. Interestingly, he spoke about trade and investment. Trade between India and Russia has been pretty modest, $10 billion. It is growing, and this is something that President Putin mentioned today. Also, investments, which are bilaterally, the numbers were revised to $50 billion because the target was met ahead of time for 2025. Do you believe that Russia now is also looking at these other aspects in the relationship because of what we have just mentioned, that India's trade ties with US are much higher?
Well, it's true that India trades more with the Anglo-Saxon world than with Russia. I think the reasons for it are obvious, and they go back 2 or maybe 3 centuries back in history. But 10 billion is not a bad result, taking into account the crisis that we had in Russia in the 90s when we were making a transfer transformation from a socialist economy to a market economy. And I think President Putin is encouraging Indian investment because India is one of the few sovereign countries in today's world. You have probably seen that in the last few months, maybe years, the United States and the European Union have been slapping sanctions on Russia like every month. Anything that happened was a pretext for more sanctions. So Russia is interested in dealing with sovereign countries, countries that can say no if the United States or the European Union want to isolate Russia. There are not many countries like that in today's world. This is one of the reasons why Russia wants so much to develop relations with China. It's not the love for the Chinese themselves, it's the necessity.
Okay.
The same story with Turkey.
All right.
And certainly India is the best choice.
All right. Dimitri, let me go across to Ambassador Karju on that point. Ambassador Karju, can India continue to put its foot down on every aspect? Because, you know, if I draw a parallel here, India has been under pressure from America as far as Iran is concerned, and importing fuel from them is concerned.
Look, this game has to be played, if I may use a very bureaucratic term, on a case-by-case basis. There are certain aspects which are so important to the interests of a country that you tell your interlocutor, tell your partner, be it the United States or any other country, that you can do whatever you like, but something that is so crucial for us that we will proceed in accordance with our interests, even if it is violative of your laws. You've got to find a way to dealing with your. This is the case with the S-400, for example. So I'm not too concerned about this. I think as mature countries, we all understand how this game is played, and this game can be played adroitly by both sides without intransigence. There is a little give and take at the margins, but that is the way it is. But permit me to say something, Maha, on the Taliban aspect, which our panelist friend from Russia raised. May I do that?
Yes, please. Go ahead, sir. Ambassador Karju, please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you. Whatever may be the legal position in Russia with respect to the Taliban, it is no secret that the Russian state has close ties now with the Taliban. That is a fact. Russia has maintained its embassy in Kabul all through. In the wake of the Taliban advance into Kabul, I recollect that the Russian ambassador said that the security situation is better in the Afghan capital now that the Taliban are here. Russia's main worry is the ISIS. And on the ISIS factor, the Russians have been dealing with the Taliban for a long period, many years. So on this aspect, I think Indian views and Russian views are very divergent. Now India has to be pragmatic and accept the Afghan reality.
All right.
But it will not be quite correct to say that that the Russia is keeping the Taliban at an arm's length, etc. It has close ties with the Taliban, legal positions notwithstanding.
All right. So last 2 minutes left. Praveen, I want to come to you for the closing comments then. Why is it then important for India to balance its relationship with both US and Russia? Is it strategically important at the moment, looking at the geopolitical situation, and can India actually do it in a highly polarized world?
So to the first question, Maha, and those are both really good questions. To the first question, it's pretty obvious that it's not wise to put all your eggs in one basket. That India has a long, durable relationship with Russia, which it would not like to lose. And remember, even at the height of its sort of enmeshed relationship with the Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union, India did, even at that point, purchase cutting-edge Western military technology with a view to sort of keeping its options open. And the converse is, true now. Having said that, I mean, how far this is going to be able to go is going to depend on what happens with China. If China's role in the region becomes more aggressive, if India perceives itself as being more vulnerable, it's going to be pushed closer and deeper into the American fold. And I really think it's the Chinese rather than India or Russia who will hold out the keys to where this eventually goes.
All right.
To the extent that the Russians can use their influence with China to moderate a potential conflict, that would be great. But it's not India that's going to be driving these choices.
All right. These choices are thrust upon India, perhaps, rather than it deciding or being in a position to decide. But at the moment, certainly, as I think all panelists agree that it is important to balance out the relationships. There is no exclusivity in the relationships that countries have with other countries, and no one relationship comes at the cost of another. But it is, of course, a balancing act that is difficult to manage, if I can put it that way. Many thanks to all our panelists for joining us here on the show this evening. With that, we're taking a very quick break. News and updates will continue. Stay with us.